This is Global Tennessee, news, analysis, and commentary from the Tennessee World Affairs Council in Nashville. Global Tennessee is produced in association with the Center for International Business at Belmont University and the International Business Council of the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce. The World Affairs Council is a nonpartisan, nonprofit educational association, and the views expressed on Global Tennessee are those of the participants.
That's the agenda, and so let's start with COVID-19. And let me just mention that I'm kind of disappointed with our president's attack on the World Health Organization. It may have stutter-stepped a little bit and not been as great as we would have liked in handling this COVID-19 thing, but in my experience, there's no better relationship. There's no better relationship between the United States and an international body than with the World Health Organization.
Yeah.
Our CDC people are, over there all the time, and it's kind of bothers me that we're sort of backing away at a time that what we really seem to need in the world is global leadership, not retrenchment.
Right. Well, we've got a couple of items that we're going to talk about in this topic, but first let's take a look at the numbers that we're talking about in terms of the COVID situation. So you can see here that global cases are over 3 million, deaths 213,000, and you can see the steep climb in cases from March through April. A lot of countries have been leveling off, but it's still a dramatically catastrophic case as far as the global situation. The United States continues to lead the world in cases. We just passed 1 million cases today. So that's on our minds as we monitor the scope of.
Just leave that up for just a second, Pat. If you look at France and Italy and Spain and the UK, they're all in the 20-some thousands, and then look at Germany, 6,000. Germany has population that's equal to or larger than all of those other countries in Europe, and yet their mortality rate is way, way low, and it's same as us. I think New York City has had more than twice as many deaths as Germany.
Yeah, and you're right. The population of Germany and France are not too far apart, yet Germany's death numbers are about a quarter of what France is.
And that's leadership and early testing. And they have opened back up their schools and a lot of the restaurants and things like that. So we'll see how that keeps going.
Let's take a quick look at the United States. As I mentioned, 1 million cases today, and deaths have surpassed 57,000. You can see on the CDC map here the relative spread across the country, from the East Coast across the Rust Belt into the Midwest, Florida, Georgia, Texas, a large number of cases. For some reason,
Colorado's in there.
Yeah, Colorado's in there, and then we see that the cases in the more rural states seem to be picking up, as has been feared. In Tennessee, we're up to 9,900 cases as of today. That was an increase of 251 since yesterday. So we're likely to pass 10,000 cases, infections tomorrow. 184 deaths. You can see the layout in the map from the State Department of Health. And here's a statistical breakdown of the top counties. Nashville, Davidson County with 2,338 confirmed cases, 25 deaths. And you can see where the other counties: Memphis, Shelby County, the other big one in Tennessee. But the numbers are going up in the rural areas.
Pat, looking at those statistics with recovered, I think it's important to note that the World Health Organization has issued a statement about the status of people who've recovered, and basically saying that there is no current evidence that people who have recovered from COVID-19 have any antibodies that are protected from a second infection.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, it doesn't mean you get it once and you're immune forever. And that's going to be a huge difference if some of the folks who had it once end up getting it again.
I think a lot of people were banking on the antibody test to show people who would be somewhat immune or bulletproof
Yeah,
to
or even
being
taking the antibodies from those that have had it and injecting it into folks that were getting it or something, I
right.
guess.
Under topic one here, on talking about COVID, we're also going to talk about the Wuhan Institute of Virology, or the WIV as it's known. That's the Chinese lab at the center of this coronavirus controversy as to where the infections originated. And we're going to tee up another slide here, Dick, and talk a little bit about.
Yeah, I think
About
I'm not a medical specialist by any means, but my understanding is that this is the only level 4, which is the top uh, level institute virology center in China, where they can deal with the most dangerous and virulent types of pathogens.
mhm.
And it's in Hubei province, which is kind of center east. So it's surrounded by the rest of China, and the Yangtze River runs right through the city. And my understanding is that the Chinese are very upset with us coming up with some theories about where this virus began. And one theory, which I think is very unlikely, is that it was created at the Wuhan Institute of Virology as part of research that the Chinese were conducting in a biological warfare vein.
Mhm.
There's no evidence that that's the case. And in fact, I think the scientific evidence show that the virus does not have any indications of having been externally tampered with. So a second possibility is that they got a copy of this virus from in Wuhan, and took it to the lab to study it, and somebody there got affected and took it out, and then it spread.
Yeah.
And that's plausible, but there's no evidence. It has not been verified that that's the case. Chinese have put out, one of your wolf warrior guys we'll talk about later, have put out the idea that the United States Army created this virus and took it to China.
Yeah, that's created quite a lot of friction between China and the United States that we talked about last week, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in the one of our upcoming topics in a few minutes. One thing I'll mention is that we try to let people know what good resources are and avoid fake news. One recommendation that I would have is to take a look at the Axios China newsletter. That's AXIOS. They have a whole series of newsletters, and the one on China from April 22nd has a really good report on this Wuhan Institute of Virology issue. Let's press on to North Korea, Dick. Another week of interesting intrigue as to what's going on with the dear leader.
Well, we still don't know what we don't know, I think, is what it boils down to, Pat. We had these intel reports last week that something serious was going on with the health of the supreme leader. He has not been seen, although I think the last few days the North Koreans have put out some indications that he's okay. But again, nobody's seen him, and so there's now speculation that's coming up. Well, if something happens to him, what will be the leadership of the future?
Yeah, I think there was an added piece of the puzzle, a luxury armored train that he's been known to travel in turned up at his luxury compound in the city of Wonsan on the Sea of Japan, and that fueled speculation that he was well, although I wouldn't come to that conclusion just by spotting that train at that compound.
Well, there've
So,
been what, 3 kind of major events that have happened, and he hasn't been appearing at any of those. So that's very unusual for him not to have been there. For
right.
example, the
Yep.
anniversary of his grandfather and that kind of thing.
for sure.
So there's
So
your
yeah,
first family, huh?
yeah. An interesting tree, to be sure. You mentioned the potential for succession, and even if he comes through this healthy, and we're still not sure what his condition is. President Trump made some comments that he knew what was going on, but at his press conference yesterday, which was Monday, he didn't let on much more than he knows and wishes him well. But taking a quick look at the succession from the founder of North Korea, which is known as the DPRK, the Democratic Republic of Korea, the Democratic People's Republic of
Yeah.
Korea. The founder was Kim Il Sung. In the upper left-hand corner, you can see a superimposed picture of him and his son, who was his successor, Kim Jong Il, who passed away, I think, about 10 years ago, leading to the succession of Kim Jong Un, the current leader of North Korea, who has various titles, including chairman of the Workers' Party. But from there, we don't know exactly which direction things could go. There's speculation that Kim Jong Un's sister, would be in line to succeed if they continue with the family dynasty. Um,
Well, the
there's
Kims basically have run Korea since it was North Korea since it was established in 1948,
Yeah,
and they've all been male Kims so far.
right.
So whether that will hold or not, I mean, the fellow to the left on your screen of Kim Jong Un is very young, and Kim himself is rumored to have children, but they would also be very young.
Right.
So people are speculating that the lady on the far right, Jo Kim Yo Young, is probably the front runner, to take over. You
Yeah,
got another
I
slide, I
mentioned
think, Pat, don't you?
what's that?
You have another slide that
Yeah,
shows
yeah.
her.
Before we go to that, I just want to mention that Kim Jong Nam, the gentleman on the left-hand side of the main level
The
there,
happy
was
face.
yeah. He's no longer around. He was assassinated by Kim Jong Un at an airport with a nerve agent that some young ladies who were hired or coerced to deliver that into his face while he was standing at an airport, and he died from exposure to that nerve agent. So he's no longer around. He was a half brother,
Yeah.
but yeah, you're right. Kim Yo Young is believed to be the primary uh, successor in line. She's a full sister. Kim Jong Un was educated in Switzerland, where Kim Jong Un was educated, and she's seen here at the Peace House with the leader of North Korea and South Korea at a meeting in the DMZ a couple of years ago, and also pictured at the Seoul Olympics, where she was standing behind Vice President Mike Pence, who represented the United States, and he was not enthusiastic, as you can see, when when the North Korean delegation was introduced.
Now, yeah, it's going to be an interesting development. It's a dictatorship that has nuclear weapons, and nobody knows which way they're going to go. So
Right,
buckle your seatbelts.
right, for sure. Okay, Israel and the pending annexation of parts of the West Bank. Um, the lead to that story this week was a report that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was reported to have said that in a couple of months from now, he was confident that the pledge would be honored, and he was referring to a green light from Washington to annex parts of the West Bank as part of the President Trump peace plan that was announced back in January.
Well, I think the important part of that comes out is that Netanyahu is feeling sufficiently empowered to make statements like that, because it looks like he's cut a deal with his arch rival, Benny Gantz, who has Gatz's party is in coalition, sort of a blue-white coalition, but Netanyahu's Likud party and the other parties have been unable to come up with a satisfactory agreement, but it looks like now they finally have. And there's a guy named Amir Peretz, who's the Labor Party chair. He has agreed to throw in with Benny Gatz's party and allow Netanyahu and make a sort of a grand coalition of the three parties so that Netanyahu would continue to serve as prime minister, and that would basically give him 18 more months in which he could push vigorously for his agenda on all things Palestinian and Israeli. So it's going to be a tough time for the Palestinians, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Let's just provide a little background and context. And on the slide, you can appreciate the history since the late 1940s of the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, dealing with dividing that land that both believe they have a reason to expect to be their own, starting with the first Arab-Israeli War in the late 1940s, the Six-Day War in 1967, which was decisive in adjusting the borders from the what was called the Green Line, or the original partition. Israel won control of Gaza, West Bank, and Sinai, and that set off the beginning of settlements. There was another war between the Arabs and Israelis in 1973, the Yom Kippur War. And then since then, there's been a series of attempts to bring peace between the parties, probably the most successful being the Camp David Accords in 1978. Jimmy Carter hosted the Egyptian president and the Israeli prime minister, who signed agreements. Dick, where were you about that time?
1978, I had just come back from Singapore and was in the United States. So working
So I imagine
but
the
focused on European affairs. So I really, was more worried about the Soviet Union than I was about Israel.
Yeah, but I bet the State Department was buzzing in those heady days.
Oh yeah, those were exciting times.
And the probably the next most significant agreement was the Oslo Accord, signed in 1993 between Prime Minister Rabin and Minister Chairman Arafat of the Palestine Liberation Organization, that allowed for a plan to bring a Palestinian self-government. In 2005, Israel withdrew from Gaza. They have since annexed the Golan Heights, and in earlier this year, there was the announcement of the Trump peace plan. Let's just take a quick look at what we're talking about here in terms of geography. And the first two, left and center maps, are similar depictions. You can be careful, though, in what maps you choose, because the the designations, the nomenclature, the lines are sure to irk somebody. It's sort of like calling the Persian Gulf the Arabian Gulf, or vice versa, depending on who you're talking to. You could get some pushback. But the center map is from the World Factbook. The Central Intelligence Agency puts out a World Factbook that contains maps that the U.S. recognizes. So those are some depictions of the territory that we're talking about.
One of the things, Pat, that I think that for most Americans, that Israel is a very small country.
Yes.
If you go back to that previous slide, for example, you can see where Tel Aviv is on the left-hand side in the middle, and to go from Tel Aviv down to Gaza is maybe 40, 50 miles. So you can go from Tel Aviv to the West Bank, and you're looking about 25 miles. It's really small. So
yep.
When you have adversaries in various places and they're so close nearby, you don't have a lot of wiggle room.
No,
and
that's
up at the top in the Golan Heights, I mean, that's a higher topography, and the Syrians would put their artillery up there and shell into Israel with rockets and artillery. So.
right. Yeah, my only time in Israel, Dick, was in the 70s. I was a submariner stationed in Italy, and I had to board the USS Memphis in near Tel Aviv. So we flew into Tel Aviv, and in just an hour, a couple hours, we drove up to Jerusalem, and it really struck me that the distance from the sea to Jerusalem was not very significant.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it was around 19, oh, I would say 88, 89. I was on a quote fact-finding trip to Israel. We had some issues, and I was in charge with trying to settle them. But we went to Gaza, and as we got close to Gaza, we picked up an Israeli military escort, and they drove us to the border. And the guy who was the captain who was in charge of that Israeli team spoke exceptionally good English. And I remember saying to him, hey, your English is excellent. Where did you learn your English? And he said, I grew up in New York. And then we went
uh,
into Gaza and picked up a different kind of export, but they were extremely gracious and hospitable to us. But that intifada was going on, and the Israelis, if there was any indication that somebody was doing something that they shouldn't do, or a house was being used by terrorists, they just demolished the whole thing. So
wow.
it was icy times.
Well, here's the laydown of contentious issues in the West Bank. The left hand, you can see settlements, the pre 1967 ceasefire line, the West Bank barrier, to the left of that illustration. Um, and in the center, you can see what is proposed in the Trump peace plan on the left as well, another depiction of the Trump peace plan. And basically, it's an agreement to do some land swaps. You can see the areas on the right-hand map, the green areas that would be turned over to the Palestinians. The blue areas would be annexed by the Israelis, areas within the West Bank. And you know, one of the issues here, Dick, is that the Palestinians have rejected this peace plan from the very beginning, even before it was announced in January.
Yeah.
They didn't participate in the negotiations. There were a couple of conferences in which Mr. Jared Kushner, who was the key mover behind the peace plan, organized countries, Arab countries in the Gulf. They got together and they talked about providing money to help the Palestinians, and the Palestinians really had none of it at that point. So what has gone on in terms of the proposed peace plan on the part of the United States and Israel really would be a unilateral move on the part of Israel without regard to the Palestinian position.
Yeah, and it's the Palestinians basically, as you say, were not involved in making this deal, and there's no effort that I'm aware of among the Palestinians to let's accept this, let's get this thing and move on.
Right.
And President Trump has said, well, you know, this is kind of your last best shot, so you guys better take it because it's a good deal. They don't think it is.
Okay, we'll have to see what happens. Mr. Netanyahu, who is himself in kind of political interesting waters, has said that a couple of months we're going to see something happening there. So
Yeah.
on to back to China, Dick, and let's talk about going to the movies. We can.
Hey, before you go to this movie, I have become a fan of, although now the season's Fauda, which is an Arabic word that means chaos.
Yeah.
But Fauda's on Netflix, and basically this is the third season, so I would urge you not to just start with this one, but go back to the beginning because it evolves. But this is an Israeli counter-terrorist police operation, military operation, and these guys are battling against the Hezbollah and the Hamas and whoever else is happening. So it's set in the Middle East, shot in Israel, so it's thing very authentic in terms of how it's laid out and what's going on.
Well, you know, we just had the last episode of Homeland, which ran 8 seasons, and Homeland it began. the first season with a U.S. Marine who was being held prisoner
Yeah.
for a very long time was
8 years, I
repatriated.
think. Right? Wasn't it? He was supposed to be held.
A very long time. I believe it was Afghanistan by the Taliban, and he was returned, and that kicked off 8 seasons that evolved into other stories. But the premise for Homeland was actually an Israeli production of
Yeah.
a soldier who had been held and then returned.
Well, when they
Uh,
returned, though, Pat, the key factor was supposedly they had been flipped.
yes,
So they were becoming spies and agents for the Taliban or the
right,
Hezbollah or whoever held them. And
right,
so when they came back, they were really working for their adversaries, not for the United States.
yeah. Well, I won't give away the ending of the 8th season, but it was something that we enjoyed for a number of
Oh,
years.
yeah.
We skipped a few years and had to resubscribe to Showtime and binge over the last few weeks, just in time to catch the live Homeland final episode. So let's turn to the movies, Dick. We have the topic of the Wolf Warriors, and you want to you're the diplomat here. You can probably best describe what's going on in the foreign ministry of China and these young diplomats.
Yeah, these are younger diplomats that are coming in armed with the skills of the social media. Kind of one of my favorite expressions about, you know, what is a diplomat, and it's kind of takes a little bit to think about it. A diplomat is basically someone who never gives offense inadvertently. So you can tell the other guys that they're SOBs, but you have to plan to do it, right? And it has to be part of a strategic way of getting it done. This. So
Sure.
there's this young man named Zhao Lijian, who is the spokesperson for the China's foreign ministry, and he is kind of a global media star.
Yep.
He was a junior diplomat in Islamabad, and he got himself a Twitter account there, and he started posting things, and a lot of that was not the kind of typical diplomatic, never say anything bad about the other guys or the host country that you happen to be in. So he got promoted, and he's become an indispensable part of that new age diplomatic arsenal: misdirection, misinformation, and social media aggression. So he's got thousands of Twitter followers along the way, and was promoted. And these guys who are like him and conducting diplomacy in that way are now known as the Wolf Warriors, which is that, as you say, the series of movies made in China that extol the virtues of the warriors who are going to go take on the bad guys, usually the Western bad guys. So how the old fellows feel about all this is not clear, but it basically, I think China likes to have campaigns, and this sort of campaign is the 4 confidences. So China has a chosen path, it has a political system, it has guiding theories, and Chinese culture. Those 4 things will lead China out into the world and will underpin what their diplomacy is going to be. Now, a lot of the older Chinese diplomats are appalled by the approach of the new guys, but they're not the audience. So he's got a following at home, and he's got a following overseas, and it's kind of a unique thing in the world of diplomacy.
Right, and it's emblematic of a lot of the pushback that we've seen from China over the pandemic issue and trade and the South China Sea. We talked last week about China um, offering an administrative designation for areas of the South China Sea, which Vietnam was irked by. But this week in the news, there was an example of the pushback. China was being called to account by the European Union in a report they were putting out on the pandemic. And
Right.
the report originally, the draft of the report originally said, quote, China has continued to run a global disinformation campaign to deflect blame for the outbreak of the pandemic and to improve its international image. Well, China got wind of that report, and the initial draft contacted some people in the European Union, and interestingly, that language was removed from
Was
the final report.
Well, China's going to have it's going to be an interesting evolution because with COVID and the impact on the economy, China's economy was smacked big. So the Belt and Road initiatives, a lot of China's activities outside the borders of China. I think they're going to be getting a second look. I mean, China was buying agricultural land in South America so that it could raise its own soybeans and ship them directly back to China. All sorts of things like that are now kind of going to be in a turmoil and a flux, and it's not clear how much sort of external projection China is going to keep up given what's going on in the world at the present time.
Well, moving on to our last topic. This is a little more fun than some things that we get to talk about here, but it's derived from all of us staying at home, and I think you're going to show us your contribution to the art world, staying at home.
You
Later
think
on.
so, huh?
So we can promise that to those who have stuck around to topic 5. Stick around to the very end. Ambassador Bowers is going to show you his home art. But we're turning to Russia now, and that seems to be the origin point for a new fad of combining contemporary images and constructions to resemble famous artworks. And this started as a Facebook group, and we're going to go through some of these images here. But Dick, your Russian is better than mine. What's that Facebook page?
Izolatia,
There you
which is a
go.
combination of isolation and visual arts. So they put it together, and so if we're stuck and isolated, at least we can be creative.
And
So
here's
that's
the Facebook page. You can
yeah.
see the Cyrillic and
usually you can hit a translate button on there, and it will put it in English, I think.
yeah. So check out Facebook. But this is the kind of thing we're talking about here. The quality of some of these recreations is simply stunning, and you can see the Facebook motif there. The URL is at the bottom of all these slides. We're going to go through a couple of these, but Dick, I don't know about you, but this is a lot of work.
Yeah, and I think just looking at some of those, it's in all kinds of different media. So some are just photos that mimic a classic picture.
Right, people modeling
artwork. There's also statues. There's Ivan the Terrible there, and he's got real models that are looking like the picture. There's one I saw that you don't have in your collection, but basically it's Mona Lisa, and Mona Lisa's hair is parted in the middle, and you can see her gray roots because she's been isolated and has not been able to get her hair done. So, but all of these. I mean,
as you mentioned, some of these are not photographs or recreated paintings, but are 3D dioramas and multimedia constructions. I kind of like the puppy coming out of the shell there.
Yeah, rather than
the birth
Venus
of Venus. Yeah. But yeah, I highly recommend taking a look at that Facebook page.
Those two little cherubs out there, it's incredible.
Yeah, and all it took was throwing 2 kids in a bathtub, and what a recreation that is there.
Yeah.
But as you can see from the model on the left, a lot went into mimicking the original artwork. And this isn't solely on this website, but it's spread around the world to museum sites and others, and we'll have a link to an article. But here you go, Dick. This
the Scream, huh? Mr. Munch.
Yeah, the Scream, and then we've got this fellow who I don't know what kind of box that is, but it's strategically placed so that we can keep the show PG-13.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and there are more and more on the website, right?
So, yeah, this is the tip of the iceberg.
And this is not all Russians. I mean, I know this is taken off, and other Europeans have been doing things. I mean, I
Right.
imagine it'll start coming out
There's
in the United
sites through.
States.
Yep. There's sites in Ukraine and Sweden and Denmark. But you can also join this group if you have something to offer. But as I mentioned, there are other websites, and I suggest you check the New York Times. You can search for Facebook art parodies on the New York Times website, or you can quickly copy down that link there and go back to the original
You know,
Facebook.com page.
and in a different vein, most of the great museums of the world have now kind of opened up their collections visually online.
Yeah,
So you can go to the Louvre and watch it from your TV at home,
yep,
or to Moscow, or to the New York Museum of Art. I mean, whatever you want,
yeah.
and they're
I
all out
think the stay-at-home movement around the world has opened up a lot of digital resources.
there. Exactly.
As you suggest, there are a lot of people putting music and literature and artwork,
Some of,
photography.
yeah, some
So
of which is parodies and, on American political leadership. Let me put it that way, I guess.
yeah.
There's a lot of stuff out there.
All right. Well, Dick, that's our
Have we
news
gone
review.
through another 40 minutes almost, I
Well,
guess?
uh, we could stick around a
Let
little
me,
longer. I don't see any questions in the queue. Um, we always encourage
you
questions, and
know,
if anybody has one, we'll be here another minute or two as we.
one of these days, if we run out of something to talk about, uh, one of the fascinating things that is going to be evolving in the future is foreign policy in outer space.
Yeah.
I mean, what is the law of outer space? Who has the right to do what where? And I was struck that it's been 30 years. 3 days ago, I think, was the 30th anniversary of the Hubble telescope,
Wow.
and it's still going on. And if you go to the website, just Google Hubble photos,
Yeah,
it
it's
will blow
incredible.
your mind.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible.
You
So
know, the irony there is when it was first launched, you may recall, Dick, that it was thought to be a lemon. There were problems with some of the
yeah,
lenses,
yeah,
and they had to send the space shuttle up to do some repair work.
and they did it.
Uh, but yeah, they did a fantastic job, and it's been a magnificent contribution to science and understanding.
And it's still going. So it's
Yeah,
in low Earth orbit out there, but it doesn't get the particles, and so its pictures are absolutely incredibly stunning.
right. Yeah, for sure. Well, Dick, one last slide here, and well, we do have a question from Campbell Lehman. Moon had not been seen at three important events in North Korea. What were the events? Um,
So
well, I know that the first one was the 15th of April. I think I know of two. Did you say three,
I
Dick?
think I did, and I think 2 is the correct answer.
Yeah, I think two is the correct answer, and they were the Founders Day, the birthday of Kim Jong Un's grandfather, Kim Il Sung, on the 15th of April, and then on the 25th, just the other day, was Army Day. And both of these occasions
A
are
big
when you
deal.
see those massive parades
Right.
in Pyongyang with the everyone in the colorful costumes
And,
doing
and
the
the
displays.
military goose stepping like,
Yeah, yeah,
incredible
yeah.
formations.
I've never seen any military parades like that.
Yeah.
We almost had a military parade in the U.S. last year. Apparently, the tanks were too heavy to go down
Pennsylvania Avenue,
Constitution Avenue, so they pulled the plug on that, and we had
probably a good idea.
fireworks at the 4th of July instead. So Campbell, good question. I'm glad you're interested in what's happening in Korea. We didn't really look at what the implications were of a succession. It's a dangerous place. We've tried diplomacy. President Trump has met with Kim Jong Un on two formal occasions,
Locations, yeah.
and one informal occasion when he was at the DMZ. They shook hands and stepped over onto each other's side of the the border, not our side, but the South Korean side of the 38th parallel at
I,
the.
I don't think he came over, did he? Trump went over to North Korea, but
I
I don't think Kim Jong Un stepped over to the South.
We'd have to
I
roll
could be
back the
wrong,
video, but
but
he may have I think step across, but
okay.
that's a good question. We'll have to research that. But if you look at what's going on, there have not been any concrete steps as a result of the summits that we had in terms of denuclearization, which was the objective for the summits. So the North
And
Korean
standing
peninsula,
down from the rocket preparations and all those kinds of things. So
right, right.
nothing's changed.
We know they've tested successfully launched intercontinental ballistic missiles. We know they have been working on nuclear weapons. They've tested nuclear weapons. They've tested a device which they claim was a hydrogen bomb, which did have a yield significantly higher than the previous tests. So they could conceivably have a workable ICBM with a hydrogen bomb warhead that could reach the United States. Of course, our friends in the region have been under the umbrella of the threat from North Korea for some time. So our allies in Japan and South Korea know what it is to be in that tough neighborhood.
Well, the whole region in Japan. I mean, then they what, Philippines, all of those countries are very reachable by what the North Koreans now have in their
Right,
army.
and a major part of the American footprint in the Western Pacific is the island of Guam, an American territory. We have a large number of forces stationed there, and that's well within the range of rocketry from North Korea. So, what happens in North Korea in terms of leadership? Whether Kim Jong Un returns to the limelight and seen in public again will have an impact on U.S. Policy in the Western Pacific. Dick, I'm going to flash up the final slide here. There being no more questions in the queue. Thanks, Campbell, for that and for your interest in what we're doing here in the webinar
Is the
series.
final slide one I'm going to be happy with, Pat?
Well, this is.
Well,
no. While I show the slide, you can prepare.
okay.
Hold off on your display of your personal artwork.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
So here's the final slide, Dick. It's
That's fine.
basically advertising what we're doing here with the webinars. We have tonight Global Nashville with Carl Dean. We'll be talking to Sean Henry of the Nashville Predators. And next Tuesday, you're going to be out, so I have to find a guest host, a co-host, to do the Global Engagement News Review at 2 p.m.
Marietta Velikova.
Well, she has expressed an interest in doing that, so she may well be your fill-in co-host. She may wind up taking the show over from you if you're out too long. And then next Tuesday in the evening, we'll have a global dialogue show, international speakers program, and I'll be talking with John Scannapieco and Jeremy Goldkorn about U.S. relations with China in the pandemic age. And last week and this week, that was a topic we covered here. But John Scannapieco from Baker Donaldson is an expert on China. He's an attorney and knows great things about China. Jeremy Goldkorn is a editor of a newsletter and co-host a podcast on China. He lived for at least 15, 20 years, I think, in China. So he's an expert on the ground and knows all things China. So that's going to be a great show next Tuesday, May 5th, 7 p.m. Global Dialogue. And we already have posted the links on our website, tnwac.org, to register for those webinars. So take a look at those and also look at our archives on youtube.com/tnwac for previous shows, both the global engagement that Dick and I do and the Global Nashville with Carl Dean. Also take a look at our website, tnwac.org, to subscribe to our newsletter and to become a member. Okay, Dick, that's it for slides. You got your last piece of artwork
My
ready to
last
go?
piece of artwork is ready to go.
Okay,
So,
let's have it.
are you ready? You
Yes, sir.
okay? So this is Mr. Dr. Fauci saying, "I want you to stay home." I saw that. I had to buy it. So I'm sorry.
Well done, Ambassador.
Put it on there.
That's our PSA for the day, and thanks everybody for
Go to that website
tuning.
and become a member of Tennessee World Affairs Council. We need your support.
Yes, sir, we do.
All right, Pat.
Dick, thanks again for another great rendition of the news.
Thank you very much, sir, for your leadership in making this happen.
You bet. We hope that everyone is a little wiser as to what's going on in the world, and we hope that you'll be back next week for global engagement from the Tennessee World Affairs Council. Thanks. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.